I am a man of honor. I've never brought shame upon my kin. Every step I've ordered such that God is praised and my community is made proud. My hands are stiff from work. I wear my calluses like badges. And if I fall, I pull myself up by my bootstraps, and I will not fall again. I have never taken advantage of anyone's hospitality. In fact, since I've become a man, I've never asked anyone for anything. All that I have, I've earned from the sweat of my own brow. As a young boy, I remember learning in the synagogue of the righteous way, learning how to respect my elders, to honor my family, to keep the Sabbath, and to follow the righteous path. Blessed is he who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of mockers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on this law he meditates day and night. Even on my earliest day, I set upon the righteous way. When, as a boy, I learned that God required me to give to the poor, I volunteered bread from my own plate, my own mouth. Later, when I learned that I should leave 1/10 of my barley and my wheat for the foreigner and widow, I left double. When I learned that I was obligated to sacrifice once a year in Jerusalem, I went every 3 months. And I did all of this without telling anyone. And I'm only sharing this with you now so you can understand why I'm here. Being the oldest child, I was given absolute responsibility over my father's affairs, even as a young man. If anything was wrong, he would come to me for answers. I knew I was being taught the work of the Lord. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. He who gathers crops in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps during the harvest is a disgraceful son. I oversaw all the servants and all the field workers and all the finances and all my brothers and sisters. My father was not a hard man, but he was serious. If something was wrong, he would respond with a gentle gravity. And when he said something, you listened. And when he asked you something, you answered. He naturally demanded respect. He did hold me to a higher standard, but I knew it was out of love. Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline. Being the patriarch of our family and a revered member of our broader community, he walked in an aura of honor. Past tense, walked. Because then there was my younger brother. Ever since the day he was born, he was wayward in one way or another. He regularly faced sickness so he could stay in and lounge. Leisure was his only achievement. Diligent hands will rule, but laziness ends in forced labor. Once, we lost 3 sheep to a lion because he forsook the flock for a nap. His slothfulness was an embarrassment. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. As he grew, his languor morphed to folly. He stayed out in the darkest parts of the night. He ran with the rabble-rousers and the lawless fiends. Once as a young man, I caught him drinking stolen wine with the neighbor's girl. Can you imagine the shame he would have brought? Could you imagine the shame he would have brought upon our family if he was caught? He always asked me to cover him, and that time was no exception. And I typically held my integrity, but that time I said nothing. I let him off scot-free, and I hated myself for it. I still do. He perpetually pushed the limit, finding the line and then completely transgressing. Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies have no sense. This childlike waywardness was already known to the entire town. I heard the rumors. I was forced to endure every single one. There was a growing, hidden shame that hovered over every one of us because of him. And what did Father do? Nothing. Nothing. He overlooked every iniquity. He was blind to the brokenness of that child. My brother was the favorite son, and everyone knew it, and he knew it, and he used it as leverage. All my brother needed to do was droop his countenance, fake a little pity, and then Father removed every single consequence of his actions. Every flaw was forgiven and then quickly forgotten by him and by nobody else. Until that fateful day. I was coming in from the fields in the early afternoon to look for him. He was supposed to be out working. After checking the swimming hole and the neighbor's house, his two favorite distractions, I came to our compound and found my mother weeping inconsolably. She told me everything that happened. My little brother had demanded his inheritance from Father. From Father! This man of repute! The well-respected one! I couldn't believe it. Apparently, my brother looked my father in the face in his somber eyes and told him that he cared more about his inheritance than their relationship. Their relationship meant nothing to him besides the money he could get. If my brother would have spit in my father's face, no additional insult would have been added. In saying what he did, he wished my father dead. And my father? Yeah, what did my father do? Nothing. He said nothing at first, nothing. And I knew why Mom was crying. And it wasn't the shame my brother had brought upon us, nor was it the pain from his cruel, daggered words. No, she was crying because she knew the righteous path. She knew the way of God. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, though they discipline him, and he will not listen to them, then his father and his mother will take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of the city, to the gate in the place where everyone can see. And they shall say to the elders of the city, our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of that city shall stone him to death. So shall you purge the evil from your midst, and all of Israel shall hear and fear. She knew what Father had to do. She told me that Father looked at him, shrouded by an aching silence, and then finally said, son, I will come back to you early tomorrow morning when the stars are still strung in the sky. I want you to really think about what you are doing to me and about what you are doing to this family. I don't want you to do something that you'll regret. Every member of this household, from the lowest servant to my very self, will not speak to you until that time, so you can have time to think. At once, my mother explained, my brother stormed off, but instead of actually reflecting, he went and met up with his evil friends, and they drank. After Mother told me all of this, I went to Father. When I entered his bedchamber, he was sitting completely still, gazing out the window, gazing on the horizon, where Brother had gone. And I went to him and said, Father, I heard what happened. I heard what my little brother has done. If you allow, let me go with some of the young, virtuous men from the city, and let's talk to him, help convince him otherwise. He's making a terrible mistake. And he said, my son, you leave him be. Father, how can we just let him go and defame our family? You will be disgraced. We all will be disgraced if we let this continue. We have to stop this. My son, leave him alone. This is about much more than honor. Father, the town will get word of this. And they will expect you to act righteously. They know the law. They know the way of God. You will have to act. He turned solemnly and said, "My son, my child, do not lecture me on the law. You will not speak to your brother. He must decide this for himself. Go. I'm surely the field hands are waiting for you." I couldn't believe it. My own father, the man who once had repute, was so blinded by his sentimentality that he couldn't even see clear enough to discipline his child. The rest of the day, no one in the entire house dared to even speak. There was a darkness that brooded, especially when my brother came home late at night, tipsy. And then morning came. My brother approached my father again, looked him straight in the eye, and said, "Father, I have thought it over, and I have made my decision. Give me my inheritance now. I demand it." It was as if my father was struck by a knife. He looked at my brother, but my brother looked down. A long time, that coward and fiend couldn't even look him in the eye. And then father completely lost the way. He went against the absolute desires of our God. Whoever robs their father or mother and says it is not wrong is a partner to one who destroys. He ordered the head servant to pile 2 donkeys with everything my brother had asked for, and then he gave him more. He prepared 6 servants to guard him as he made his way through the town square, because by now everyone had found out, and they were waiting. The stones were collected in the fading light of last evening. They, the elders of the town, were people of honor. They knew the scripture. If anyone curses his father or mother, he shall surely be put to death. My brother left with his unspeakable wealth and a stride in his step. He had not 1 ounce of remorse. He didn't even say goodbye to his own brother. When the servants returned, they told me about what happened when they walked. The elders of the city shouted out for them to halt, and they did. The elders demanded that my brother be turned over to them so he could be stoned for his insubordination. And then the servants gave the elders of the city a letter from my father and revealed that he had given them his signet ring as a sign of his foul complicity. The elders tore their cloaks, and in disgust, they let my brother on the way, scoffing and cursing him as he went. The servants continued, and they said, before they left home, they asked my brother where he was going. They're on the far side of town. He answered that he did not know. All he knew is that he was leaving this land, and he was never coming back. If my brother could do this, he is not my brother anymore. I vow to never call that man my brother again. And so that man went and took his wealth to a far country. When that man left our community, we were shunned for months because of father's disrespect and rejection of God's way and his paternal responsibility. When I went into town during those months, people would cross on the other side of the street. No one dared to even speak to me in public. They know they'd be dishonored too. It was unbearable. I lived the righteous life. I had followed the straight path, and now I was being punished for his sins. The wages of the righteous is life, but the earnings of the wicked are sin and death. Yet he goes free with innumerable wealth, and I bear his shame. Too much, too much. I cried out to God, Yahweh, vindicate me. I am a man who follows your precepts. I am a man of honor. Condemn this wicked man. Blot him out from your sight. Our family, once revered, was now a laughingstock. My father was a pariah and a fool, and it was deservedly so. Ever since that man left, Father would spend hours gazing out upon the road that led to the city. He did so every day until sunset, looking, waiting for that disgusting man. Father's mawkishness knew no bounds. He was weak. He was pitiful. After that fateful day, you know what I did? You know what I did? I did what I'd always done. I got up and I went to work and bore my responsibility with honor. Because Father was so distraught, all his responsibilities fell on me. And because my brother was gone, you know who took up his work? Me. Regardless of how fair it was, I knew what was right. I knew what was the righteous path, and it was my familial duty. It was my divine duty to carry it out. The work of my hands have now been established. And so, I carried on. Things settled down after the corporate shunning had run its course, and though a palpable sadness surrounded my mother and father, the house returned to normal. That is, until I found out what Father had done. A month after everything settled, he asked a few of his hired hands to track down what that man had been up to. And when they returned, he was devastated. That man had been squandering my father's inheritance for months. He'd used it for wine. He'd earned a reputation for his drunkenness, his revelries. A sluggard's appetite is never filled, but the desires of the diligent are fully satisfied. And it didn't stop with alcohol. Oh no. He spent huge sums of money on prostitutes. That man, if you could even call him a man, used Father's money, our money, for whores. And when Father found this out, he made the hired hand swear to secrecy. It didn't work. We were a complete disgrace. And still, Father stood every evening staring at the horizon. Father, what about me? I followed your every word. I've done everything you ask, and still you look for him. He obsessed over that man. His absent-minded, maudlin desperation made me sick. From that point on, that man's depravity hung over our house like a perennial storm cloud. Every little thing, every little detail spoke to that man's brokenness. We knew that right now, regardless of what was going on, he was either drunk or he was spending our money on hookers. Sponsored by Dad. And that realization changes you. It takes any of the social shame that you felt and it tunnels it within. You walk with it. We all felt the searing guilt of his transgressions. But Father bore it the worst. Even the very mention of that man's name would immediately conjure tears in his old wizened eyes. Father, a man of respect, was now crying like one of the women servants. From that point on, Father disallowed any wine from being in the house because it reminded him of that man. Which meant that the workers and field hands had to retrieve huge sums of water daily. The nearest well was miles away. And entering the synagogue was like walking into court. Everyone knew the judgment, guilty. We were reaping the consequences of that man's sins as he reveled in the purchased love of prostitutes. That man ruined our lives. He ruined my life. And then he had the audacity to come home. I was coming in from the fields after another long day of hard work. It was dark when I reached the house, and to my surprise, I was standing outside a party larger than I had ever seen before. For a moment, I wondered if I was finally getting some recognition for all my years and years of quiet service. I was wrong. I asked the house servant for the reason of the party, and he told me everything. That man had come home, and he was bone thin. He stunk of pig manure. His body showed the repulsiveness of his soul. He had not a penny to his name. And when Father saw him from a far way off, he ran. If that man had not caused us to learn enough respect, to lose enough respect, Father gave all the rest in that moment. This man of respect, running, weeping in front of everybody. It was unbearable. That man wore rags. He was emaciated. He was completely unclean through and through. And Father embraced him and sent a servant to cloak him and put new sandals on his feet and a ring on his finger. Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies will have their fill of poverty. This man, this hellraiser, this fantasy chaser, I've labored till my fingers were bone, and I've never received anything from my Father. While this spendthrift is cloaked in Father's best garb. It didn't stop there. Oh no. He invited the entire town and slayed the fattened calf and poured wine generously. See, the glutton and the drunkard, when he comes home, then we eat, then we drink. My service to my Father had never ended. When he was at his worst, when Father was grieving, I took charge. I took care of everything, and I've never received even a goat for me and my friends. But this was the best part, right? How could he afford the celebration? How did that man afford it? How could he afford the choice meat, the select wine? The cost of the party must have been great. And surely it didn't come from the man that wasted all of his inheritance on whores and strong drink. Here's the funny part. That money came out of my inheritance. If it wasn't already insult to injury, that money came from my inheritance. It wasn't enough for my brother to cause me daily dishonor. He came back to take even more from me. Lord, I followed your righteous path. And Father, he has forsaken it. Father has forsaken it. Show them all their folly and make everyone see their fault, especially that man who has returned. And as I stood outside that celebration, my Father dared to come and speak to me. He pleaded with me to come in. It was pitiful. That man had lost the way completely. So I responded to him. Father, I said, I've slaved for you all my life. I have always followed your every word. And I've received nothing from you. Nothing. Not even a goat. And now you go and kill the fattened calf for that evildoer? Not only that, but you do so by taking from my inheritance. While you grieved, while you languished, it was I that took care of the property. And everything in it, I never diverted from your way, from the righteous way. And now you take me for granted. While you give this man, your son, all your attention and your affection. Do you remember when the community shunned us for months? It was unbearable. Even my dearest friends left me. Dishonor after dishonor was heaped upon me, upon us. Father, you taught me to be a man of honor and integrity and of sound decision making. And he had done nothing to earn this. How can I go in and celebrate the man that ruined my life? My father looked at me with eyes full of remorse. They looked like the eyes of a begging dog, and said, "My child, my honor and my joy, everything I have is yours, everything. And you will always be with me as long as it is up to me. But that man, your brother, was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now is found. If that were you, I'd do the same. I never thought I'd see him again. Please, my child, come back inside." My father had fallen under another one of my brother's spells. The deceiver has deceived again. I looked at him and said, "Father, all those years ago, you set before that man life and death, and he chose death. He chose dishonor. You said you would do the same for me, but I would never need it. I've always chosen you. I've always chosen life. I've chosen righteousness. That man has not, and I will not reward him for it. Father, you've lost the way of holiness. How can you celebrate depravity?" My father dropped his head and tried to embrace me, but I pushed him away. My child, all I have is yours," he muttered, "and this door will always be open." And then he walked back into the party with sadness in his gait, the kind that only comes from age. Now you understand. Now you understand why I can't go through those doors. I can't because I'm a man of honor. I'm outside because I have followed the Lord's way. Because I've kept my righteousness, kept my integrity in the midst of everything else. That's why I can't go through those doors. I'm here because I refuse to bend to the brokenness of another. I'm here because I'm a man of honor. I'd rather die than go in and join that circus. I'd rather die.
Very dramatic.
Yeah. So did I for a moment.